Last week for Thinking Thursday, I covered the murder of Hypatia of Alexandria, which got me talking a little bit about the destruction of the great Library of Alexandria. I thought maybe we would double down and cover that today, and then I thought, no, let's go all the way back. What was the truly first great library in human history? And as far as we know, it was the Library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, and it too was destroyed. And we see this pattern all the way through history, and I think it has some great warnings for us even today, or especially today. Why is knowledge such a threat? Why do we continue to do this to each other? Why do we erase culture and achievement from other places and times? Where could we be as a people if we did not do this, if we protected and valued and even prioritized knowledge? And so today I'm going to tell you the story of this first great destruction of collected knowledge. We're going to talk about the king Ashurbanipal. We're going to talk about his kingdom in Nineveh at its height, right before its great downfall, which of course goes along with its destruction of its library. We're going to talk about what was in that library. We're going to talk about how we know. We're going to compare it to other great losses in history. I hope this sparks your interest. It has a little bit of everything here. It has philosophy, it has history, it has religion, and again, it has a great thinker. In this case, someone very forward-thinking for their time, King Ashurbanipal. So let's start with him. Here's a good quote from him to set the stage. I, Ashurbanipal, within the palace, understood the wisdom of Nabu, the god of learning, all the art of writing of every craftsman, all knowledge of scribes and scholars. I have read the cunning tablets of Sumer and Akkad. I have solved the riddles of the sky. Now, none of this is to glorify this king. He was still a king of brutal conquest. He obviously had a major ego here, but how unique to have a scholar king. Most ancient kings were warriors first and scholars, if at all, second. This seems to be opposite for Ashurbanipal. He was actually trained as a scribe, again, something unheard of for a king. He could read and write in both Akkadian and Sumerian. That makes him the first known literate king of Mesopotamia. He was fascinated by knowledge. He saw intellectual power as even greater than military power. Again, not to say he didn't utilize military power, but wow, what an amazing acknowledgement. He personally sought to collect books from all over the empire. And maybe I should explain that. This is the Assyrian Empire. I mentioned Nineveh, which is its capital, so think of Washington, D.C., to the Empire of the United States. Another quote here to help us. I pierced the lips of kings with a dagger, like a pig's snout. I bound them with chains and made them live in dog kennels. Okay, not someone to glorify. Some of his brutal conquerings included Egypt itself. He defeated the pharaoh there, a very first, making Assyria the only Mesopotamian empire to fully conquer it, though he installed some puppet kings and he couldn't really control them. Then he moved on to the destruction of Elam, truly obliterating them, burning everything to the ground, even looting royal tombs and desecrating their gods. Then you have the siege of Babylon, where he starved these people out for 2 years and did horrific things to their leaders, like flaying them alive. And I have to say it again, this is what is so cool about being able to be honest with history, as opposed to when we talk about the history in the biblical context. We can just say it like it is. This was a brilliant man, a successful man, and a terrible man. We don't have to make excuses about how, well, he was a man after God's own heart like David, even though he did these horrific, wicked things. And I've seen a pattern with some of the Christians who watch my other videos and then have moved over to watching these, where they will talk about how horrific some of these people are, like Percy Shelley, another great thinker that I covered. But they're the same ones who will defend King David when he cuts off 200 foreskins, mutilating the dead, that he did just to collect his next bride, as he was a polygamist. Like, it's absolutely insane, the excuses believers of any religion have to make for their respected patriarchs. Nope, we get to just talk about these men of history for what they are. But despite this brutality, his ways were effective. He ruled for centuries, where Assyria was the dominant superpower of the ancient world. Also interesting to note, he was a king that wasn't meant to be. Another quote for you. I am of royal descent, the son of a great king, the seed of kingship, but I was not the eldest son, yet the gods chose me. The story's amazing. His father, Sauron, really set up his sons for something horrific here. So he assigns one son, Shemeshumukin, to reign over Babylon. That was the older son, while Ashurbanipal takes the Assyrian throne. Of course, this is going to set them up for conflict, and it does. It split the empire in two, and his brother's rebellion to take Nineveh was the greatest challenge, supposedly, of Ashurbanipal's reign. But he won, and he ended up being the last great king of the Assyrian Empire before its fall. Now, before we move on to the library, I want to help set the stage. Again, most of my audience is very familiar with biblical history, and so I want to help place the time here. Ashurbanipal was born in 685 BCE. His reign was 38 years, starting at 669 BCE, and he dies in 631. So we're talking 7th century BCE. So what was happening biblically during this time frame? Right before it, you get the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel. That's in 722. The Assyrians had already conquered Israel under Ashurbanipal's grandfather, Sargon II. What a small ancient world it was. The 10 northern tribes of Israel were exiled at this time. This is known as the Assyrian captivity, and we can read about it in 2 Kings. And then it was Ashurbanipal's father, who we mentioned, who ruled over during this aftermath of the conquest. So who was ruling at the same time as Ashurbanipal? We have King Manasseh of Judah. This is the son of Hezekiah, for those of you that remember when we went through all of this in my secular Bible study series. Manasseh was a loyal vessel to the Assyrians. In fact, he is talked poorly about in the Bible because of this as one of the great wicked kings. And even according to 2 Chronicles, the Assyrians captured Manasseh at some point, brought him to Babylon, likely under Ashurbanipal's orders, and then eventually sent him back. So the Bible portrays Manasseh as this puppet of the Assyrians, but in all reality, he was just one of the many small rulers that had bent the knee to Ashurbanipal. And then after the death of Ashurbanipal, Assyria weakens, thus the destruction of the library, which allows Judah to rebel, and this is done under Josiah. So maybe in a minute we'll talk about some of the inconsistencies between how the Bible talks about Assyria and Nineveh versus its realities, but I want to get to the library. Another quote from Ashurbanipal bragging about his library: "I have read the cunning tablets of Sumer. I have studied the secret writings in all the tongues of men." So, what exactly was the library? Well, we know it wasn't just a random assortment and collection of books. This was systematic. And our best indications show that there were over 30,000 books, or we should call them what they were, clay tablets, containing mainly Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian texts. It preserved 1,000 years of Mesopotamian history and literature and innovation. They were organized, they were labeled, they were categorized. Again, that may sound mundane, a library may even sound boring to you, but until we find further evidence of something before, this is the first time in history this is happening. And it happened at such a grand scale, in such a grand place, at such an amazing pinnacle of time for this empire. It's just too fascinating. And all the subjects were covered in this library. You had medicine. This included diagnostic manuals, treatments for diseases, remedies. It's even fun to look. Some of these remedies are so bizarre, of course, by today's standards. It talks about exorcisms for mental illness, but others showed advanced medical knowledge, how to use the plant life around you, special concoctions of herbs, and even how to perform surgeries. It had the subject of astronomy. It had star charts, planetary movements. It recorded eclipses dating back centuries. It's some of the earliest scientific astronomy ever recorded. It had law. It laid out the Assyrian legal codes, showing a highly systemized level of government and rule and law. It had history. It had royal chronologies. Talked about the rise and fall of other kingdoms. There were, for lack of a better term, religious documents, divinations and omens, evidence that priests were using astronomical events and dreams and animal behavior to predict future events. There were copies of even older Mesopotamian texts, religious texts, ensuring the survival of these ancient stories, one of them, by the way, being the Epic of Gilgamesh, probably the most notable find of the discovery of this library. And it was discovered, and much of it was preserved because, unlike Alexandria that was using scrolls, these were all clay tablets. So when the fire came to destroy it, just baked them. And so yes, the most famous was probably the Epic of Gilgamesh, which contains, of course, the oldest known flood myth, with many, many similarities and parallels to what we get in Noah's Ark, and of course predating it. And it's pretty much the first known, or at least recorded and found, hero epic, the story of King Gilgamesh's quest for immortality. We have the Enuma Elish found in these. This is the Babylonian creation myth. This is where we get the god Marduk. And then the rest that are most famous have to do with the rituals of the time and the mathematical and astronomical records of the time. So why was the library built? Why did this happen when it hadn't seemingly happened before and to such a great scale? Well, again, it was because of the king. Ashurbanipal wanted this. He understood that he who controlled the knowledge controlled the power. He ordered scribes all over the empire to copy meticulously every single important document they could find and to send it to the capital, to Nineveh. A state-sponsored project for the protection of knowledge. Again, I don't think many people who don't have an understanding of the significance of this in history can appreciate this to its fullest degree. That's simply amazing. It also served as a research center. Again, when these societies that we see even come after had these sanctuaries of knowledge, we see this exactly played out in Alexandria. It promotes more knowledge. You come, you study, you learn, you grow, you add to, you edit. Again, the first known attempt to systematically gather, organize, and preserve human knowledge. And the last reason is something like a balance. The chaos that was going on the military front, constant war, constant siege, constant rebellion. The library in the capital was a way to bring order, to protect this knowledge. But of course, like everything, it didn't last. So, in 612, the Babylonians and the Medes come together to attack Nineveh. The library was burned, and then it was buried under all the rubble. Again, very fortunate that the fire happens first because it hardens the tablets, of course, and preserves them underneath all of the destruction, preserving them for thousands of years. So why was it burned? Why does any conquering group destroy the knowledge of another conquering group? There's different reasons. Sometimes it's to erase them. It's to show the finality of the destruction of the conquering. That knowledge is the representation of the other, of what came before, of their power. And again, destroying their knowledge destroys their power. It's so sad that that's how it was viewed, as opposed to going and having the mindset of Ashurbanipal, which is, no, I want that knowledge. I want that to increase my power. It's a very myopic way of conquering those around you, to not utilize their resources, but to destroy them. So yeah, to erase history, to rewrite the narrative. Many times because of religious conflict. We see many other examples other than the Library of Ashurbanipal where this is clearly evident, one of them being the Library of Alexandria. That one happens in the 4th century CE. In Baghdad in 1258, we know specifically the House of Wisdom is destroyed by the Mongols. That was one of the greatest Islamic libraries, and they threw all the books into the Tigris River. In the 16th century, we know that the Spanish priest burned nearly, literally almost all of the Mayan written records. Only 4 works survive to this day. I could give you 100 more examples of the destruction of knowledge and then the downfall that it led to for a period of time. A small little dark age, sometimes much larger dark ages like what happened after the Library of Alexandria burned. But it's just our human nature. It is the competition and the lack of respect for wisdom over military power, which again is what makes even this horrific king Ashurbanipal special in his time. So, without getting too political, to end here, I think it's important to know these things in history. It's a common quip, and it's quite true, even if it's trite, that the best way to prevent history from repeating itself is to understand it. We see some of the same religious and political tension in our country today that countries like Nineveh and Alexandria and the Mayans and the Qing dynasty and many other places in history that have experienced a evaporation of their once culture, of their once freedom, of their once intellect, and the value of knowledge lost for the sake of political power or religious ideals. Think about the greatness of Greece and Rome, what they are today. Did you know it's estimated that 90% of all classical Greek and Roman literature has been lost because of the political and religious differences at the time and the destruction, the purposeful destruction of knowledge? We see certain things trying to be erased from the internet right now under the new political reign in this country, and there are many fighting to preserve it. And in fact, that's one thing I wanted to end with, kind of a measure of hope here, is that in today's day and age, things are still fragile. It's not perfect. Knowledge can still be erased, changed, manipulated, lost, or destroyed. But there are a few efforts going on to preserve them. It's actually almost scarier, this digital dark age that could happen, where files can be deleted, servers can be taken down, and censorship is easier than ever. And it's not just written knowledge. I'll give you kind of an off-the-cuff example. I think it's called the Solverb Global Seed Vault, literally preserving seeds of all kinds in case of some great catastrophe. And even to make sure, just from time that we don't lose the great works of literature. We have the Internet Archive and Gutenberg Project, digitalizing all books and all forms of written information. But again, that just sets up a new possibility for the digital erasure and change. You have certain individual groups like the Vatican archives that are protecting secret and selective knowledge. Why is that not being shared? Why are we not all trying to have as much information as possible and doing everything we can to protect it, even if it is considered wrong? That's where religion comes in. We have seen so much because you get this attachment, this permission of, hey, if it doesn't fit within the narrative of my truth, because I do know the one perfect truth, then it's of the devil, then it is there to deceive, then it is there to lure people away, and you get a justification for this horrendous thing. Carl Sagan says that the destruction of knowledge is the greatest detriment to humanity. Something very similar to that, at least. And I believe that he is right. If you have the one true religion, why do you need to fear knowledge and information? But again, there are many other efforts to preserve knowledge and make sure that this never happens again. But it's a very scary thing. And this small video, in my small part, in my small way, to my small audience, is just an encouragement to not be afraid of knowledge, to have the desire that Ashurbanipal did to collect wisdom. This is the goal of Thinking Thursdays, to introduce you to someone or something from the past. And even amongst the chaos and the corruption, there's something good to hold on to there, something beneficial to learn from and to apply in our lives in this day and age. Thank you for listening. I hope that you are enjoying this series and these videos. Let me know what topics or people or events you would like to have covered. I already have a long laundry list. This is such an exciting project for me. Again, it is what I love speaking about the most. So drop your suggestions in the comments down below. I'll see you Sunday for a new video. And until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Alexander, Ann, Boris, Eric, GVI, Joe, Kiboga, Perry, and Sean; my Humanist Heroes, James, Jared, Christy, and Thronus; my Atheist Advocates, Caleb, David, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Malcolm, Paul, Sparky, and Thomas, with a special shout out to all of my secular scholars and free thinkers, and also wanted to acknowledge all of my skeptics and rationalists who are not on the screen. Because of your combined generosity, we're able to help those who are doubting, deconstructing, or deconverting. If you haven't yet, would you please consider joining these fine people? Thanks, and have a great day.